ever been told that you're letting your kid get away with it? Or maybe given some unsolicited parenting advice? Maybe your school is blaming you for your child's behaviour. It's really tough being the parent of a child with special educational needs, and it can be incredibly lonely too. One of the reasons I started this podcast was because I remember how isolated I felt when I started on this journey of Zen parenting. I felt so lonely. I felt no one understood. So what I wanted to do is create a space for parents who are feeling like that to come together. Now, I know that lots of parents really struggle to come to events in real life, to sometimes even leave the house, and that can be for a variety of reasons. So that's why I created this online space in the form of a podcast. And in this week's episode, we're going to tackle parental isolation head on, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to make it a little bit easier. So keep listening. Welcome to the Zen Parent Survival Guide podcast. I'm your host, Esther Freeman, and I teach parents the techniques and principles for how my daughter went from 5 or 6 violent meltdowns a day to virtually 0. In this weekly podcast, you will learn how to have a calmer family life, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. In this week's podcast, I'm going to be breaking things down into 3 parts. The first part is going to be about what it is and isn't okay for people to say to you. Because I hear all the time from parents, am I being oversensitive? Should I be making a fuss? And quite honestly, this is a form of self-gaslighting. This is when we convince ourselves that what people are saying to us is okay and we shouldn't be making a fuss. Well, actually often it isn't, and we just need to face up to the fact that what these people are doing it's not okay, and we have a right to speak out. And that brings me on to the second part of the show, which will be about boundaries. Now, we talk a lot about self-care in parenting, and self-care is really important, but often it's put into the context of things like going for a spa day or hanging out with the girls for a night, and those things can be great and really valuable and have their place, but self-care also needs to be about things like boundaries, because if we don't have those things in place, then all the spa days in the world aren't really going to help. So we're going to talk about boundaries and some of the things that you can put in place to protect yourself and your mental health against people who maybe aren't being very helpful. Now, the third part is going to be about building that community that is going to be helpful, that is going to be supportive. And for some of you, that might mean starting completely from scratch. So I'm going to give you some tips and advice on how you might want to do that, or if you already have a network, how you might want to strengthen it. So let's start from the top there. So what is it okay and what isn't it okay to say? So let's start with unsolicited parenting advice. Gosh, it's everywhere, isn't it? And that is not okay. If you want advice, you will ask for it. And you shouldn't be giving it unless someone asks for it. A supportive and mutually beneficial relationship is one where someone shares and the other person listens, and they wait for you to say, can you advise me on this? If you don't give them that cue, they shouldn't be giving you the advice, and you are within your rights to say, actually, I don't find this helpful and I don't want it. So it's not okay to give unsolicited parenting advice. The other thing it is not okay to do is invalidate or dismiss your child's disabilities. This is straight out ableism, and we should call it out as that. It particularly happens with children who may have hidden or invisible disabilities, because people who can't see it think it doesn't exist. But it's not okay, and we need to stand up for our children and ourselves by calling it out. And if anyone is doing this to you, you have a right to say no to them. So The third thing that I want to come on to is that well-meaning supporter or friend or family. Now these are tricky because they're not meaning to hurt you. They often don't come at you in an aggressive form. But I have to say this is something that I've experienced a lot, and it took me a while to realise that actually it's not okay. It doesn't matter what their intention is. It hurts when they say the things they say. So let me give an example. My daughter masks, and so people often don't see the struggles that she's going through, but she would come home and she would let loose on me, and my life was a nightmare. And so I'd often have people coming up to me going, oh, you know, I saw her today in school and she looked happy, and well, she was fine when she's here, or she's coming out of school and she's smiling. Now, they don't understand that this is a part of a complex routine that she goes through in order to protect herself. And the minute the door closes, the minute that they've gone, all hell breaks loose. And actually, what I need them to do is just listen and hear that, rather than telling me, from what they saw, she seemed fine and I need to stop worrying, because that's essentially the subtext of what they're saying. They might be meaning well when they're trying to reassure me that what they saw looked fine, but the subtext is stop worrying. But I know when I need to worry and when I need to stop worrying. I don't need to be told by other people. And it doesn't help me. When has it ever helped anyone when someone said to them, oh, stop worrying? When has that ever helped anyone? Of course it doesn't. And so you have a right to say, I'm not going to put up with this. It doesn't matter if it's well-intentioned. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And I will talk later about how we deal with the well-intentioned people, because we may want to go a little bit more subtly with them. I think it's also important to remember that the well-meaning people may have their own internal intentions behind what they're saying. So I had a friend who was constantly downplaying and invalidating not just my daughter's experience of being a neurodivergent child in a neurotypical world, but other children's as well. And I suspect that that was because she had this internal conflict going on within herself about how she felt about disability and about how she felt about the children that she knew and loved being disabled people. I think there were some problems that she had internally about how she felt about disability, and that she couldn't accept that these were disabled children, that they were not normal. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, then I have just done quotation marks around the word normal, because you know what I mean. It's their differences she couldn't cope with, and that might be because of her own fears about how they would be treated or how they would get on in the world, but they were her fears, and it's not okay for her to be projecting those onto other people by dismissing, downplaying and invalidating the experiences of both the child and the parent. Now, the final point that isn't okay to say is, I didn't mean to cause offence. Okay, you didn't mean to cause offence, but you did cause offence. And when you've caused offence, the right thing to do is to acknowledge the offence that you have caused, accept it publicly, and then change your behaviour. Because otherwise, all you're doing is saying, I'm not to blame. So whether it is parents or friends or family, if they say, I didn't mean to cause offence, that's not okay. They caused offence. You have a right to call that out, and they should be acknowledging their part in that. So let's get on to some solutions here, because this has been a little bit down. I'm feeling a little bit down now. So let's get on to some solutions. Let's talk about boundaries. Boundaries are so important in all aspects of our life, but I think they're particularly important when we're parenting a child with special educational needs, because it is about protecting our emotional reserves. The emotional labour involved in raising children like ours is intense, so we need to protect ourselves from anyone who's going to suck the life force out of us. So if you have someone who is giving you unsolicited parenting advice, who's telling you that you are letting your child get away with it, who is criticizing your parenting in any way, you have a right to say to them, I really don't want to discuss this with you. I don't want to discuss my parenting choices. And then what I would suggest is quickly change the subject to something neutral, like the weather, Britain's favourite, the weather, your holiday, all the great lines that the hairdressers come up with, you know. And just shut it down, basically. Now, some people will respect that if you set that boundary. Some people won't, and they may push on it. You may need to say it a few times. Have that stock phrase ready and be prepared to repeat it a few times if necessary. Now, for those people who really aren't respecting that boundary, who are keep pushing at it, you may need to take a second approach with them. And you have 3 choices with these people. So the first choice is that you limit your contact with them. So just stop seeing them so much, basically. There's a kind of option B on that, is that you could continue seeing them, but just not with your child. So, for example, if it's a family member, you might say, well, I'm going to come over by myself and we'll just hang out and, you know, we'll not get the kids involved because the kids are clearly a trigger point. So you could do something like that. Now, I had some people in my life, as I said, I had this more sort of, I wasn't really having my parenting criticised. I was just being told that I was worrying too much. And there were some people who were doing that to me that I just decided were a loss leader. And it's like, right, no, you're gone. I can't, I'm not invested enough in our relationship to put up with this anymore. So I actually just stopped contact with them. So that is your other option as well. You can just stop contact. That's a very personal decision. I'm not telling anyone that they should stop speaking to the grandparents. You might decide that you have to. That is a very personal decision. I tended to do it with people who were kind of the lower rungs of my friendships, who were doing it, and it's just like I can do without this friendship and I could do without this crap. So I just got rid of them. There were other people who I was like, I actually really value your friendship, but this part of the friendship is not serving me, it's stressing me out. And so what I did was I just stopped talking to them about it. So with my situation, because my daughter masked, that was fairly easy. If I didn't bring it up, we didn't really talk about it. They would sort of say, oh, you know how she's doing, and I would just say fine and then change the subject, because I just didn't want to talk to them about it. I wasn't going to go into all the struggles that I was having, because I knew they could not listen to this without giving me unsolicited advice or invalidating my experience. So I just brushed over it. And actually those friendships have generally survived. We just have that boundary within the friendship. We're not talking about this. But not all of them will, and I have had to make some quite drastic decisions in my life about who's going to be in it because of my daughter's needs. And some of you will have children who are acting out, and it will be causing a lot more tension, and you might be the ones who are going to have to make some quite tough decisions on how you assert those boundaries around those people. So the next thing I wanted to get onto is school, because obviously with school we don't have a choice to go low or no contact. Not unless you decide to home educate, which is not a privilege everyone has because of financial constraints and other reasons. So the most of us will have to continue to send our child into school, and we might find that the responses that we're getting from the people who are supposed to be supporting us in school, whether that's teachers, or other support staff in the school, that might be really stressing you out because of the things that you're saying. This is where we're most likely to see some of the blame coming up. And that's very hard to deal with. So I would say one of your best forms of protection against that is knowing your legal rights. because the way we stop these people in their tracks is to hit them with the law and just say, you can't do that. So, for example, a situation I'm in at the moment is that my daughter is not getting her learning breaks at school. It's causing her a lot of stress. She's coming home and she's unleashing onto me. I'm talking to the teachers and they're giving me the usual, oh, she's fine, she's had a lovely day. And so I just printed off the pages of our EHCP, that's the Education, Health and Care Plan, that stipulate that she must have learning breaks. And I said, I don't care what you think you are seeing in the classroom. It says in her plan that she should have these breaks, that she can initiate these breaks. They need to happen because an EHCP is a legally binding contract and they have no choice but to deliver it. Now that had some success initially. Stop working now, but I know my legal rights and I know what my next steps are going to be, and if necessary I know I have a legal right to take this to judicial review. I'm not going to get into all of what this is at the moment, but you do have that option. So when you know your legal rights, you get empowered. Now I'm going to do a little bit more on the topic of SEND law, SEND educational law. So if you are interested in that, make sure you are subscribed because I'm going to have some big news coming up on that quite soon, and I don't want you to miss out on that. So yeah, know your legal rights. And I want to say, just getting back to the well-meaning people that we've talked about a bit today. So even if they are well-meaning, you still have a right to assert a boundary with them and say, I know you mean well, but I don't actually find this very helpful. It would be better for me if you could just listen. That's all I'm looking for at the moment, is just someone to listen. I just need to be heard, because in this world we so often don't feel heard by the people that we're asking for support from. We're saying we're struggling and we need support and we just don't feel heard. So the best thing that you can do for me as a friend, as a family member, whoever that person is, to say, can you just listen? That is what would help me most. So there are some ideas on what you can do. Now, you also might want to be thinking about creating a new support network for yourself, because you may, as I said, be needing to cut people out of your life, reduce contact with them, or just decide that I'm not going to talk to this person. You know, I had people in my support network, I talked to them about everything, and then, you know, became a parent and I suddenly found that the biggest thing in my life I couldn't talk to them about. So I needed to kind of replace them. Not, you know, I still had their friendships, but I decided I wasn't going to talk to them about this. So I needed someone else to talk to about it. Now, I would say the first thing that you need to do is be your own best friend. And by doing that, you need to think about your emotional regulation, because we cannot think straight when we are not emotionally regulated. And one of the best things for this, it's very quick and easy, you can do it by yourself at home, it's called tapping, or emotional freedom technique. Now I've got some free resources to help you with this in the show notes, and it will explain what it's all about and how you do it. But very briefly, it is a form of talk therapy that combines with the ancient Chinese tradition of acupuncture, but instead of needles we use our fingers. And as I said, it's very quick, it takes less than 10 minutes to do. You don't really need any special skills. You need to know a little bit, and that's what the guided meditation is all about. That will explain everything that you need to know, and that will take you through it. And I really urge you just to give it a try, and just, it sounds a bit kooky, but honestly it works, and I find it so powerful. I was having quite a difficult morning, to put it mildly, and I knew I had to sit down and do this podcast, and I just couldn't think straight. My head just sort of felt not quite like cotton wool. I don't know how to describe it. It just felt full. It was full of stuff, and I couldn't sit down and work out what I wanted to say in this podcast today. I was just like, I can't do it. And I just thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit down and do some tapping. So I spent half an hour. I chose to do a long session because I just had so much stuff in my head and so many emotions that I needed to process. You don't always need to spend that long on it. The tapping meditation, in the show notes or in the video description that I'm sharing with you, it's less than 10 minutes and you will see some benefits from that. I chose today to spend half an hour just because I had so much to shift. And you know what? I was able to process a lot of those emotions, and once I processed them, suddenly I could think clearly. I'd kind of taken all the overwhelm and stress and taken it out of my head. And then there was room. There was room for ideas and creativity and content that I wanted to share with you all. And that is how I am now sitting here talking to you. So do tapping before you do anything else. Now, after tapping, you might want to start thinking about who are the people out there? Where can I find them? The people that get me, the people I can talk to without judgment. And I would say one of the first places I would turn to is the Parent Carer Forum Network. Now, you can find a list of these local groups. They're all over the country, and you can find those on the Contact is a charity for disabled families. You can find it on their website. I will put a link to them in the show notes or the video description if you're watching this on YouTube. And so you can find your local group. They vary in size and activity, but I found them so helpful. They do training, they do, ours does walk and talks, coffee mornings. They even occasionally do meals out. I'm not sure they all do that. Ours is very active. And they've been such a great source of support for me. And I found a lot of my Send Support network through the Parent Carer Forum, and now we kind of have our own little groups that we do stuff with. Now, if you don't feel ready to go out and walk and talk with a bunch of strangers about your disabled child, maybe you've just had a diagnosis and you're still coming to terms with it, you're just feeling a bit shell-shocked by it all, that's completely understandable. What I would recommend instead is you find some online networks. Now, if you're listening to this, you've already found this podcast. There are other podcasts out there, lots to choose from. I like to have a variety that I listen to when I'm doing the washing up or walking the dog, and they just help me feel connected. There's also loads of great Facebook groups out there. You can sit in those and just lurk for a while. You don't have to speak out. That's fine. I know lots of people like to go onto Instagram. There's lots of great people to follow on there. I'm on there. Come follow me. But there's loads of other people too. So joining online, on YouTube, on blogs, on podcasts, that could be an easy way to just bring yourself into it, so you know that you're not going mad, that you don't need to question your parenting technique, because I know all these people on YouTube are telling me this is the way I should do it, and I can tell you that if you are parenting using my parenting strategies, you are not doing it wrong, because my daughter is living evidence that this does work. You're not letting them get away with it. It is a relationship first strategy that is suited to neurodivergent and other disabled children. So have confidence that other people are doing the same as you. Now, another way that you might want to consider meeting other parents like yours is through the schools network. So if you are in mainstream education, this can be a little bit harder to, work out which are the parents who are like me, although I have to say after a while you get like a little bit of a nose for it. I don't know what the SEND equivalent of gaydar is, but I feel I have that now, and I just spot that parent that looks a little bit more stressed than the others. So I've been able to work out, and also just once you met one, they'll introduce you to another, and I found that was how my network grew. They would say, oh, so-and-so's got a child like yours, or so-and-so's struggling with the same thing as yours, would you like me to put you in touch? I had a lot of that going on, and that helps you grow my network. If you're in a special school, you can of course just talk to the parents on the school gates. I have been standing and moaning with the parents on the school gates quite a lot this week, and I have to say it's quite nice that it's not just all sitting in my head. I can just go, oh my God, can you believe this thing? This is frustrating me so much. And just know that other people were feeling the same frustrations as you. And you can talk about strategies like, how should we deal with this? What do you think we should say? Should we speak to the teacher? Or, well, maybe, you know, this is going to happen. Maybe it will get better. And, you know, so you can have those conversations with other people rather than just churning it through your head constantly. I think that's really important, because I know that I'm a really big churner. If there is something to dwell on constantly, I will dwell on it. So I find it really helpful just to kind of go blah and get it out, so it's not just going around my head. I can bounce the ideas off other people as well. So I hope some of this has been useful. I hope by listening to this podcast you feel a little less alone, that you have some strategies, that you know how to put those boundaries in place for that behaviour that you now know is not acceptable. You're not going to gaslight yourself anymore. So give it all a go. See how you find it, and stay connected to this podcast if nothing else. So next week I am not going to be here, because I am going to be having my final hearing at the Sen Tribunal. Oh yeah, I'm a bit anxious. This has been a long time coming. I've been waiting a year for this, so it is a big deal. So I'm just taking some time off next week, and I'm just going to focus on that, because that is obviously my priority right now. And I just want to give a real big shout out to everyone else out there who is in the tribunal process at the moment, or maybe you're thinking about getting into it. Maybe you've just been rejected for a needs assessment, or you've been rejected for a plan, or like me, you've had an annual review and it's really not gone very well. Any of those scenarios, you might want to be thinking, what should I do now? And I would encourage you to take it to tribunal. You might want to consider mediation first. Not going to get into the pros and cons of this. We'll save that for another podcast. But if you're going to go into tribunal, got a few things that I wanted to suggest. The first is, as we've been talking about today, don't do it alone. Have your support network around you. The second thing that I want to recommend is do the IPSI tribunal course. I've recently done it. IPSI are a charity of solicitors who give free information advice. They're so invaluable. They're so amazing. I absolutely love them. And I recently did their tribunal course. It didn't cost much. I think it was like 20 quid, something like that. It was like half a day. They do it within school hours. They understand the pressures you're facing. And after doing that course, I felt really empowered. I was like, right, I know what I need to do. I know my rights. I know what they shouldn't do. I spotted things that the local authority hadn't done, and I was able to go back and say, right, you need to do this. You haven't done it. I was able to pull together some extra pieces of evidence. So yeah, love their course. Highly recommend you do it. And actually, if you do this course, if you can't afford a solicitor, this will really prepare you well for going alone, because actually most parents go to tribunal by themselves. They do represent themselves. This is not like criminal court where, you know, they say, well, never represent yourself. That's really dangerous. This is a Sen tribunal. It's very different, and most parents represent themselves. And just getting a little bit of support through people like IPSI is a really good way of doing that. I did start off with a bit of legal support, but it got too expensive and wasn't really helping. So I actually dropped this and have mainly been doing this by myself. And as I said, that course from IPSI made me feel really empowered. So I highly recommend it. And finally, I want you to remember that the stats are on your side. I think it's around 97% of parents are winning their cases. So if you go to tribunal, you have a really high chance of winning. The challenge is obviously the long wait for the hearing and the stress that you will endure. And that's why you need your support network around you. So I won't see you next week. Hopefully we'll see you the week after, and hopefully I'll be feeling a bit more relaxed because it will be all done, and I can tell you how it's all gone. So in the meantime, I'd just like to ask you one more thing. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please consider giving it a rating and review, because this helps other parents find it. And this whole episode has been about breaking parental isolation. So let's keep that going. Give something back by giving it a rating review, because it helps the algorithm, it helps people find it, it helps break isolation. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss the episode 2 weeks' time when I come back with something new for you. In the meantime, take care. I hope that's given you something to think about parental isolation and how to break it. Now, I've got another video that I think you might be interested in just here. This is about mental health hacks, so how to extend that self-care and look after yourself. So give that a click, and I think you'll find that useful too.